Welcome to Making Meaning, the show where we do a deep dive into a hot topic. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into health. What is health? How do we measure it? What are the trends? I want to welcome my panelists, Jenny Topinka, Ranbir Sanghera, Bill Welzien. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to jump into health trends. We're going to start off by looking at some data, and we're going to just see what is the reaction of my panelists to this data today. All right. Overall health, we're just going to look at US data because it's probably the worst in the world. All right, so we're going to look at from 1970 to 2020. And we're going to first of all look at life expectancy. So 70 is where we were in 1970. Average. So male was 67 and female was 74. And then let's just jump forward. 2020, we have overall it's 77 and 74 for male, 74.5 for male, and female 79.9. Now, that's a very big jump, and that's great. So it's 7 years on average. But let's actually look at what happened in 2010. So in 2010, it was 78. So there's a difference between 2010 and 2020 of 1 year, which may not be a lot, but maybe we'll dig into that. All right, let's jump down to maternal mortality, and 18.8 in 1970. And then let's actually look at 2010. It was 15.2, and today it is 23.8. And then let's look at the a key number here is obesity. And it's 15% in 1970, and 2020 it is 42.4. 42.4. And then one more thing on this, and that is the leading cause of disease, which I think I actually need. Okay, yeah, here we go. Okay, leading cause of death. In 1970 was heart disease, and then we jump up to 2020, it is heart disease and cancer. All right, so let's look at obesity-related deaths and type 2 diabetes. So these are all things that are related to obesity. Okay, so type 2 diabetes used to be in 1970, 2 to 3% of adults. In 2020, it's 13%. Sharp increase since 1990s, tracking with obesity. The next is hypertension. High blood pressure was 25% of adults, and now it's 45%. And heart disease is leading cause of death in 1970s, and then it's still the leading cause of death in 2020. And we're moving over to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, rarely diagnosed in 1970, and now it's 30 to 40% of adults. Osteoarthritis, I see this as a yoga teacher. A lot of people have arthritis. It was 5% in 1970, now it's 17.5. And then sleep apnea, rarely diagnosed, now it's 20 to 30%. This goes on. Cancer, obesity was not linked, and now it's 40% of cancers. 40% of cancers are now linked to obesity. Chronic kidney disease, rarely associated, 17% now. I'm going pretty fast now. Gallbladder, 1 to 2% of people in 1970, now it's 8 to 10. And now I want to talk about something I really want us to explore as a group, and that's health span. Health span means that how much time are you able to be strong and move your body, be mobile, be independent, versus being in a bed with machines attached to you. Can you live independently? So 1970, life expectancy was 70.8, and now it's 77. But HALE, which is this health span number or acronym, was not available, and now it's 66. So you can see here the time that you're able to be independent and strong on your own is now 66 years. And it used to be, when we first started measuring it in 1990 was 68.9, and then 70, and then it went down to 69, and now it's down to 68 or 66. Disability-free life is another way of measuring this. So it's so fascinating to me that these numbers 65 to 66, and now it's exactly the same. So we're making ourselves live longer, but we're going to be disabled for the last part of that. So we actually have not added really these disability-free years. And then chronic disease prevalence was 20%, and now it's 45%. All right. I'm going to stop sharing and just get some reactions from our panelists. So Jenny, let's start with you. What is some of your reactions when you're looking at this data?
Yeah, this is pretty alarming, I would say. The first thing I notice is that from 2010 to 2020, we went the wrong direction. That was where in many of these metrics we've made a turn. And that's really scary. And I don't know how much of that is driven from COVID, because that was like the death rate, like COVID was one of the main causes of death. But I do know, just from my own anecdotal experience and walking around a city, I do see more people who are looking unhealthy, right? I don't know exactly what's going on, but it's almost like there's a bimodal situation. Some people are getting really, really healthy because they care and they're focusing on it, investing their time and their resources there. Other folks are not. And so I really think that this trend from 2010 to 2020, which went the wrong direction, I do think it's real. But I think we need to recognize it's average. And I do think that you've got this very bimodal situation going on. So that's my observation. It's pretty scary. And I want to be in the side that is, actually investing in it and making myself move these metrics in the right direction.
Nice. Thank you, Jenny. So Ranbir, what's your gut reaction to looking at this data?
Kind of a little bit off of what Jenny said, or what pops into my mind is I go off by observation. Um, Meaning like if I want to accomplish a certain goal, I try to observe because people will say a bunch of things and it might make sense or it might sound right, but it doesn't actually always match up. If you just observed, why is this group of people healthy? Why is this group of people unhealthy? It doesn't always match up with that. So I find observation is very important. But to me, what has always stood out was I look at averages and stuff, and obviously we would love everybody to be healthier and living longer and be more uh capable, or independent as you get older. But my concern has always been the person in front of me. So, I've been a coach since 2012. And somebody might come in and it's like, oh, well, men's testosterone starts dropping after 30. The average is XYZ. And my response was always like, well, look, for you, the person who I'm talking to, that doesn't have to reflect any of that. Like you get to make your own decisions and you kind of have to be open to what do I actually want? And then now I can observe what causes that and see the similarities in the people who have the thing that you want. And also just asking deeper questions because somebody who's concerned with testosterone, oh my God, I want they become fixated on that number versus, well, do you actually care about the testosterone number or do you care about all of the things that that number represents? Vitality, vigor, energy, how you look, how capable you are strength-wise, endurance-wise. So you might not actually care about the number, you just use that number to fixate on and you forget about all these other things that it actually represents. So to me, it becomes like whoever is watching or wanting to be healthier, because my assumption is everybody wants to be healthier and stronger and more capable, etc. Really know what you want and be open to that being a possibility for you, and don't let the scary statistics distract you from that, because it is possible. It is possible for every single person. So that's kind of what pops into my mind when I look at statistics like that and data like that. Yeah.
Ranbir, I really like that you're reminding us that we're individuals and just this data doesn't have to dictate our life. I think that's really, and I think this is going to be a theme in our discussion today. I have a feeling about it. So, Bill Welzien, tell us your reaction to this data as a 74-year-old. You're probably the one who knows, you remember the 70s. Like when you looked around and at the population in the 70s and now, what are some of the differences you see that's reflected in the data and from your observations?
Well, to look back, at being the age I am now, there's a lot of people that I grew up with, people that I've known over my life who aren't around anymore. They've passed on, and people die from a lot of different factors. Um, I mean, to look back at the 70s, in the 70s, I was 20 years old. So, my observations were probably quite different than my observations are now. I don't know. I mean, I used to think when I was in my 20s that if somebody was in their 40s, that they were very old. I've come to realize now that old age is anybody that's 10 years or more older than I am. So I don't feel like I'm old. Uh, but I think it always has been alluded to by Jenny and Ranbir. It's us trying to take the bull by the horn, be responsible for ourselves, and doing what we think is necessary. I guess you have to have some idea in your mind of what you want to be health wise. Everybody's dealt, as was just pointed out, a different hand. Genetics, the place where we live, opportunities that are available to us, all of those have an effect upon us. But I found, early on that if I can get myself in shape physically and mentally and spiritually, it's easier to stay in shape than to try to get in shape. There's a sense of well being that I get if I continue to do the kinds of exercises that I enjoy. I eat certain foods. My system's probably much more sensitive now in eating certain foods than it was before. When I was 20, 30, 40, I probably could eat a whole lot of different foods and different food combinations and it not have much of an effect upon me. But I think it's really, you got to try to get to know yourself and then try to work within that knowledge to find what makes you feel best in the course of a day. And there's a lot of factors, of course, that we don't have any control over. I mean, if you just stumble down the stairs or you reach for something and lost your balance, there's so many things. Accidents are called accidents because they weren't planned. So I don't know if I'm giving you much information here to work with, but if you have any follow-up questions, feel free.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to now jump into history and let's all just think about our grandparents. So, Dad, did you ever meet, I'm sorry, Bill Welzien. Oops, I just gave it away. Bill Welzien is my father. Sorry, everyone. Okay.
Sorry about that, huh?
I'm not sorry. But so Dad, did you ever know your great grandparents? Did you ever meet them?
No,
No?
no.
So when you think about your grandparents and how they thought about health, did they have the word health in their vocabulary? What was their mindset around well-being?
I would say my father's father was alive when I was a kid, and my mother's mother was alive when I was a kid. And today, if I described them and their lifestyle, I would say they had the SAD diet, right? You know what that is, right? Standard American diet. Meat and potatoes. If they had salad, it had some iceberg lettuce and maybe a tomato and maybe a little bit of cucumber in it. To me, today, that's not even I mean, I eat like a big salad every day with like everything in it. So I think they were just products of their day and age, and it just kind of went along with the prevailing mindset of that time. My father's father, my grandfather, he was a big smoker. I went to their home once, maybe when I was maybe in my mid to late teens, and they wanted to repaint the kitchen. I had to wash it. It was yellow. It was painted white, but it was yellow from nicotine. That was all over the original paint job. And my grandfather, he passed away from lung cancer. So they're not thinking, if we went over there, they'd give us the candy bowl. Hey, the grandkids are here. Here, help yourself to the milk chocolate that was filled with, regular sugar. So no,
What about exercise? Did they have gym membership, Dad?
I don't think they even ever thought about that. And my dad, he was very active in his high school years. He was a letterman, as they called him back in those days. He was quite an athlete. And I think by God's grace, I inherited a lot of his genes. But as he got older, he just got overweight. And a lot of men back then, and probably still now, after you got married, you found the woman of your dreams, and then you kind of settled down and you weren't very active anymore. He used to go out to work hard, come home and watch TV, and that was kind of the lifestyle.
Mhm. So your dad wasn't monitoring his sleep scores?
I don't think so. I don't even think he didn't even, when he passed away, he never had a cell phone. My dad, he didn't even know how to work his answering machine on his landline. So no.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Bill Welzien. Let's jump over to Jenny. So, Jenny, when you think about your ancestors as farmers, how did they think about health? What was the consciousness and awareness of health?
Yeah, great question, Bet. So yeah, as you mentioned, my family heritage is from Wisconsin, at least from my memory, right? So on my mother's side, I remember very well my great grandparents, and they lived in the middle of Wisconsin. It was a very wholesome life. What I remember is, well, our family is religious, and so we did not drink, smoke. There was no TV. It was just very wholesome, a lot of gardening, home cooking, fishing. So we did not have, and we didn't do a lot of like candy and things like that. So I feel very thankful for that. However, I do recall my great grandfather had cholesterol issues, or he had high cholesterol. So he was always worried about eating the eggs, and he couldn't have that and couldn't have this because of some of these biomarkers, and also had diabetes. So would take insulin and watch things like that. But at a grand scale, it was really not until the doctor said you have a cholesterol issue or a insulin or a blood glucose diabetes marker that they actually took some action. So I'm very thankful that their way of life, though, yielded to generally good health. And they did not go to the gym. We did not have gym memberships. It was walking in the woods, getting fresh air.
Thank you, Jenny. And let's go to Ranbir. So, Ranbir, what's the oldest grandparent that you've met, and just knowing maybe even from your parents' stories, how did they think about health? And also, where were they in the world?
So we're from Punjab, India. I was actually born there. Um, I knew my dad's dad. He was alive probably until 2015, I think, 2014-ish. And then recently my mom's dad just passed away. He was bedridden for the last easily 4 or 5 years. And my mom's mom is still alive, and she's slowing down a little bit, but she's super active. Um, Nobody thought, they didn't think about health, at least in the sense of, Western society. Um, what I have heard from my parents is obviously back in India, so we're all farmers. My family was all farmers. And like my great grandfather, my dad's grandfather, he lived until he was like 100. Very, calm, patient, hardworking guy. On the day he passed away, my dad was he was like 15 or 16. He was driving the trucks. So he started working when I was 14. He was about to go out on a load and he called everybody. He said, "No, everybody come back." So they had the whole family come back and he passed away that night. So the reason I bring that up is there there's like obviously in older cultures there's this wisdom of, however many thousands of years that they've collected that leads to a, well-being and addressing certain things. But I don't think they looked at it from the health perspective. Like nobody worked out. Like they didn't, unless you were like a wrestler, which, wrestling culture is huge in India, for, however many years, thousands of years. And everybody else, they did the work. And obviously all the food, you can't get more organic, healthy, whatever. Then they had their cows, they had the milk, all the food they grew. So, and there wasn't a lot of food. So I remember like my dad telling me he started his first business when he was 5, stealing chicken eggs and then selling them so he could bring back the money to his mom. Um, but it was just like if you were a person, you had to be active to procure food, and thus you would get a lot of those health benefits that we don't get today because 8 hours plus of my day is no movement at all. And then my leisure is no movement. My, everything is no movement. So I don't think they thought about health, because it was just everything you did was healthy. Um, the culture has transformed. I'm not a big fan of India, um, culture and a lot of the different things, but that's a topic for another day. It has morphed into, which is again very similar to Western society and culture. Everything is bad for you, and it's just a fear-based thing, and looking for answers and putting all of our, like I really like what Bill said about taking responsibility, putting everything in the hands of some doctor to give you the right thing. And so I've seen the Indian culture since they didn't. I think these things, as they go through phases, they give us contrast and then help us see what's important, what's good, what's not. But I've seen so many health problems and like just older Indian people, they can't move. They can't do anything. And it's just a very not enjoyable way to go through life for that person, but then also for the family members as well. But they just take it as once you get older, this is how it is. So it's just kind of like it's not even dropping down into the level of awareness to be able to like remedy it. And last comment on this, I've thought about this a lot because I'm like, okay, I'm Indian, and my all the Indian older people I see, they need a little bit of strength training. They need a little bit of getting their heart rate up. I have these 4 pillars: get strong, get lean, get winded, and get peaceful. And I'm like, they need a little bit of all these things in order to experience a more enjoyable life. But trying to talk to somebody in their 50s, 60s, 70s who's Indian about some type of exercise, I've thought about it so many times, like how could I deliver this or approach this and help these people? But as of now, I am still at a loss. So yeah.
Wow. Okay, I love the ways we're sort of building this conversation. This is really, really insightful. And Dad, we've gone around all the whole everyone's answered this question about the history. Okay, so let's talk about these current trends. And I'm hearing this trend of ownership. I think ownership might be a word, responsibility. And what worry about, and maybe you guys can tell me if you see this in people who are maybe following these unfortunate trends, is that they are putting the responsibility of their health into someone else's hands. Like someone owns my health and they will give me a shot or a pill when I need it. And otherwise, I'm going to follow orders and I'm going to be compliant. And that's what healthy means. Does anyone else sort of see that happen in our culture? Does anyone want to jump in?
If I
You're on
can,
mute. Yeah, go
I
ahead,
say,
Dad.
I think it's human nature to want to go what's perceived to be the path of least resistance. Discipline, self-control. Those are challenging concepts. When you allow your senses to take over, why do people eat sweets? Because they like them. If you've eaten a lot of sweets through your life, your taste buds are accustomed to that, and you have a craving. It's an addiction. And so if you start to gain weight, you start to feel, the negative effects of too much carbohydrates, sugars. Well, what either you're going to have to say, well, I'm going to have to curb that appetite. I'm going to have to retrain my taste buds. I'm going to have to learn to say no to this thing that's always brought me so much gratification. And that's hard. It's hard to do hard things, but it's usually the hard things that prove to be the most beneficial to you. People have said, well, you really like exercise. And I got thinking and I realized, well, I really don't like exercise, but what I like is the result that I get from exercise. So that's self-discipline. You have to make yourself go out and do that walk or that swim or that run or get on, get the weights out, whatever that is. So it's a matter of prioritizing what we consider to be most important. And if your health is most important, you can't just say, well, the doctor will give me a pill. Well, doctor may give you a pill and that might solve one problem, but then there's going to be some kind of side effects to that particular pill. And maybe there's a better way to deal with that problem, like eating less of this and more of the other thing than just taking a pill that seems to be a quick fix. So again, it's going to come back to, do you know your body? Are you trying to become sensitive to your body because it's yours and somebody else is going to have a different reaction to something than perhaps you will? So how sensitive am I? And am I willing to just go to the doctor and let the doctor tell me what he thinks I should do? I think there's a place for doctors, but maybe we give too much priority to these people that we think are going to have a quick fix for us. And maybe there's something to follow the money in all of this stuff as well. But
Wow,
that's
Dad. I mean, Bill. Dad, remember, I'm trying not to get canceled.
oh, what did I
Follow
say?
the money. Okay. Any other reactions to this ownership of your health? Ranbir's about to jump out of his seat. Ranbir.
Yeah. Well, it just like I like to give examples. Two quick examples on this, and the list of examples is endless. I like when I one of the things that we always taught at the gym is, the strongest thing you can do is to lift up another person. That was always one of our things. Like it doesn't matter if you can't treat yourself and other people well, like it doesn't, that's not strength. And so I don't like to demonize or have tons of judgment against doctors and medicine. I think the incentives from knowing a lot of doctors as clients and being in that, involved in that, unfortunately, it's about incentives. And the incentives, where I'm not going to get into those types of, conversations, but the incentives are not to help somebody take control and have you know, a a a, a strong, healthy life. That's not the incentive. But so for me, as a personal example, I was obsessed with dunking. My whole life was about basketball. I accomplished that, but I was not strong enough, and I had this back pain from like 18 to 21, where I couldn't walk sometimes. And all the doctors were like, you got to rest. They would, just don't do anything. So there was no answers. And so if I hadn't been so fixated on, like what Bill said, you you uh uh you you got to decide what you want. What are you looking for? And I was like, there's no way. So I was just kept looking for answers and looking for people. And the doctors, what I within 30 days of strength training properly, back pain went away. Next time I saw my doctor, he's like confused. He's like, "Oh, well," and they kind of were dismissive about it. And it just like I see this over and over and over again of like, and at the same time, I have empathy because a person who does not have our background or experience or knowledge, think about what the average. So I live in two worlds. My family businesses, which I've grown up in and run, convenience stores, and then the gym. So I get to see a broad spectrum. I can tell you a person who walks in right now who's 50 pounds, 60 pounds plus overweight, and they're grabbing, some chips, some soda, whatever. They want to get healthy, but they are so confused and overwhelmed and like, well, who's right? That person said this is good. So I have a lot of empathy for those people because it's not it's very simple, but it's not easy. So, yeah, I think starting with that of just like deciding, well, I want X and being supportive to those people is the answer. So, which is why I don't like the whole fear mongering attitude of most people who are ostensibly trying to help increase these or change those trends in another direction. I just don't find the fear mongering helpful. So
All right. Thank you, Ranbir. And Jenny, anything coming up for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about people's agency and
Mm.
really taking ownership and prioritizing. And I thought about this a little bit beforehand, and I wrote down a couple of words. One was convention. And there's been so much convention of what the Western medical community does. And there's also confusion. And then there's convenience. Thought of those three C's. And they all kind of are interplaying here, which cause folks to have challenges, I think, with their health. The convention and the confusion is because we're trying to do the right thing, but literally we don't know. I can tell my story, which is that when I was around the year 2000, I was in college and actually was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And it was very advanced. And so there was no question what needed to happen. I needed to have the ovaries out. I needed to have a complete hysterectomy and then chemotherapy. That was really okay, right? I mean, that needed to be done to save my life. However, what's interesting is after this, when I no longer had my ovaries, I got a lot of conflicting messages on hormone replacement therapy because it was truly at the pinnacle of the confusion. I had some doctors say, you need to take it, hormone replacement therapy. Others doctors saying, no, don't do it. And my mom was really scared about me doing it because of this, the World Health, the WHI, the Women's Health Initiative study that had just been published. And so I really wanted to do the right thing. And I even went to the best doctors and I got conflicting messages. So I think this is some of the issues, the convention, the confusion, and we just need to keep searching, I think, and until we feel ourselves that we're doing the right thing for our bodies. And sometimes that will not be convenient and we need to prioritize and do the hard thing. So yeah, that's my little reflection on us and agency and what can get in the way.
You know, if I can,
Yes. Bill.
just kind of build on what you were saying, we might have issues and we're confused about, you know, what's the best remedy and solution. And then we might experiment, we talk with people, we pick their brains, we experiment with this or that. And then we may say, I think I found a solution for this particular health issue. But as we go through life, the fact is there's no plateaus. So while you might take care of one issue, one problem, something else is going to come up. You're going to find out, you know, when you went for your annual physical, you know, there's another problem over here that you never dealt with before. It was never part of your experience. So it's a whole, this whole thing is a lifelong process. And you didn't mention, Jenny, if you got the hormone replacement or you chose not to, and if you got it, how well did that work? But there's always, as long as we're in this fallen world that we're in now, there's always going to be other things. Maybe, you know, when you're in your, up until you're 40 or 50, you never had arthritis. But now when you're in your 50s and 60s or older, that's something that begins to raise its ugly head. And then you have to figure out, okay, what am I going to do with that? So it's really, it's a whole, there's not, none of us are going to get to a place in this world where we solved all of our physical or emotional dilemmas that come in our way. But I think the thing that we have to be always desiring is looking for wisdom and finding out what seems to work for me, which might not be the answer for somebody else. But just curious, Jenny, what did you do? Which of those options that were before you did you go with?
I did. No, I'm happy to share. And yes, I did do the hormone replacement therapy. So since I was, you know, approximately 20. However, for a couple of years, I went off of it because a specialized doctor from MD Anderson told me I didn't need it, right? But then I went back on because it didn't feel right. And so again, you have to pay attention to your body and get the diverse opinions on really what to do. So I'm glad I made that choice though, that I did stay on, you know, now. And now, of course, the research is showing that hormone replacement therapy is actually quite beneficial as long as, you know, certain parameters are met on when you start it.
Yeah. And so that was an answer and a solution for you. And so, but you were proactive about it.
Mm-hmm.
You looked, you talked, you investigated, and you came up with something that's been very useful and helpful to you. So that's great. You can now talk with other gals who are in a similar situation about your experience.
Exactly. And I'm very thankful for the health that I've had since then.
Amen. Very good.
Mhm.
All right. So we've kind of been touching on this, but I want to know what health metrics you personally watch and monitor and how you do it. And I think we're going to have very different kind of ways of thinking about this across this generational pool here. So, Dad, I mean, Bill Welzien, can we start with you? What are some of the health metrics, markers, and if that even means anything to you, that you monitor? How often and how do you do it?
Well, uh, I think we have to really seek to get to know our body, to become sensitive to, if I eat this food, how do I feel after it? If I eat that food, how do I feel afterward? If I combine these two foods, what happens? So I think we really have to be prayerfully sensitive, um, and kind of keep our ear to the ground, so to speak, about, like I mentioned earlier, there were foods I could eat, 10, 15, 20 years ago that if I eat them now, I just don't feel good. Um, I know that I need to stay active. If I go, for me, swimming is my top favorite exercise. And so I try to have a plan. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do my dumbbells. Why do I do dumbbells? I use just 15-pound dumbbells because I'm concerned about my shoulder girdle, about my upper body, so I can stay healthy to swim. So my normal days, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Sometimes because of scheduling, it's Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And sometimes I don't get what I was aiming at. But if you aim at nothing, you're certain to hit it. So that's become, for maybe decades now, I try to do the dumbbells. I try to be in the water if possible, 3, 4, 5 days a week, swim for about 50 minutes, a little bit over 2,000 yards, walking, or maybe a little running. So those are things that I do that have become a good habit. And I think that's what we're talking about, is developing good habits. Somebody once told me, if you do something for 28 days in a row, it's likely that that's going to become a habit for you. So we have bad habits, we have good habits. So if we want to, it's interesting, isn't it? Uh, when you get to Christmas time, and New Year's time, people are buying all this exercise equipment, and they have all these wonderful New Year's resolutions. The best time to buy used gym equipment is probably in February, because those people who had the best intentions have forgotten about those, and their gym equipment now is a clothes rack, and they don't use it any longer. So we want to have good habits when it comes to diet, getting some exercise, and starting to change our diet from whatever it is. Being careful about not just putting things in your mouth continuously, comes back to the idea of self-discipline, self-control. Um, you want to maximize your quality life as long as you can. So what can I do, knowing me, being a steward of my own body? What can I do that's going to enhance my quality of life, with the hand that's been dealt to me, right? Because we don't have any control over our genetics, or if we had an accident now and your knee's bad and you can't run any longer. So what can you do? So I think we just have to be very, very sensitive, and then try to find out what works for us. And that can be a process, and it probably will in some sense be a process your entire life.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Bill. And let's hear from Ranbir. Would you have biomarkers that you're tracking? And if so, how do you do that? And how often do you do it?
So I mean, I've been doing this stuff and being or immersed in the world of nutrition fitness since 2008 or 2009. And I have personally known, and I've had these people coach me, and a lot of them are my friends who are kind of at the forefront of these different metrics and how to track them and different products. And you know like I've looked at all that, and I just keep coming back to simplicity. So like, back in 2012, one of my really good friends was a PhD who helped really pioneer HRV tracking. At that time, it was kind of difficult to do so, but so we did that. I did track all that stuff. I know a lot of people love the Aura Ring. I looked at all that also, and I was like, and this was like early on when it came out, and I was like, again, my mind goes to simplicity, because if it's not practical and convenient, the probability of you doing it starts to decline. And so me personally, the only metrics that I watch or pay attention to um, are on a daily basis are, did I lift? Did I get enough activity? I measure that by steps. And what did I hit my nutrient targets, right? Calorie targets. And then and what does the scale say, right? And I know people have all kinds of, oh, the scale is it like it's data. It doesn't do anything. And I like to juxtapose things. People will know all the data for fantasy football or some show, and that's cool, that's fine. But the question I ask is like, look, if you have the capability of doing this, this is giving you enjoyment, but this will also give you enjoyment if you start monitoring your health data. I always tell clients, hey, get blood work 6 months, 12 months, all the time, so you have an idea. Um, but personally, like, those are the only things that I look at. And the conclusion I come to is, if I do my things, get strong, get lean, get winded on purpose, and get peaceful, I know my metrics are going to be where they're at. I do think seeing those metrics for somebody could be an eye-opening experience, and that's very useful. So like somebody who's drinking a lot and they don't even know they're getting terrible sleep, and they just kind of go about life, and then they see their aura ring and they're like, oh man, I'm not getting any deep sleep. And then they take that alcohol away, and then they're like, oh my God, I got all this REM sleep. That is a phenomenal tool. So I don't like to be I think there's always a lot of nuance and subtlety. So I give my own how would I do practically and why. But also, if a tool is useful for you, let's use it until maybe it no longer is useful, or now you've gotten that information, and like, how does that metric inform behavior? Now you can just modify your behavior and maybe check in on it once in a while. But that's kind of how I look at it. Sometimes I feel that people add too much complexity to all the things that they're tracking, and that decreases the peaceful component. And so we all know people who are doing all the right things, but they're going about these right things in a stressful way. Guess what? I mean, you guys all know this. Your emotional state of mind affects your physiology. Like, that's no longer like, people maybe, earlier people be like, oh, that's a bunch of, baloney. But now we know, we have the data that if I'm constantly angry and stressed and at war with myself and at war with the world, my health's probably going to start to deteriorate. So that's kind of my perspective and how I kind of look at metrics. Use things that are helpful, but be mindful of like, am I using this to like stress out and distract myself? So that's my perspective. I think everything can be useful. So yeah.
Ranbir, this is really helpful to hear about this. And I'm now going to share a little bit about Jenny and I. Jenny and I have worked together for many years, and one day she had this ring on, and I was like, "What's that ring about?" So I'm just such a nosy person. And she's like, "Oh, that's my aura ring. It measures my sleep." I was like, "That is the silliest thing I ever heard." And then about a year later, I actually bought one. And this is, I think, my second or third one. But Jenny, bring your hands up like this. Jenny, do it. Jenny has two aura rings. They're from different kind. What's the other one? What's the other one?
Ultra-human. Ultra-human.
So Ranbir's all about simplicity. Jenny is
Mhm.
like, I'm gonna have two sleep trackers. Okay, so Jenny, what are the biomarkers that you're tracking? Tell us what you're watching, how often.
Real
Uh-oh,
quick,
Ranbir.
real quick. I do like that because now you're comparing the accuracy of the data. So
Right.
I like that a lot.
It is
Jenny is,
different. It is very different.
what
I
are all the
love
things,
trying
Jenny?
things.
Tell us.
Well, no, what I do like about these is I try not to let it impact my day in terms of, is it going to be a good or bad day by how I slept, right? I try to also go intuitively and listen to my body. But no, I do look at how much deep sleep, how much REM sleep, how much total sleep, because sometimes I see, like, I have actually been getting less REM sleep these days, and I'm trying to figure out why. I also know that I do cryotherapy, and that helps my deep sleep. So I use it to monitor my sleep. I also like it because it can show me trends. And like when I did have COVID, it told me that my temperature was high. Okay, I can also take my temperature. But lately, in terms of trends, it's told me that my resting heart rate is a little bit high. And I'm actually curious on why that is. Is it because I'm eating too late? Is it because I'm a little stressed out? So I have yet to kind of crack that nut, so to speak. But this is what I track daily. I can also tell you that I work at a software company, and we have a software called Asset Performance Management. And I'm going to use the analogy here. What this software does is it looks at big heavy duty equipment, say a rotating turbine, and it looks for small changes over time. And it's looking at all these different measurements, pressures, temperatures, vibrations, etc. And it's putting all those signals into a model and looking over time to say, are things changing, gradually over time? And if so, what could be wrong? Is it a bad bearing? Is it a bad combustor, right? It puts all the data together. My vision is that for the machine of Jenny, I would have this data over time that I could then use to piece together what might be happening. And I feel like the data coming from these wearables is one piece of that. What is missing to figure out the machine of Jenny and so things that are on my wish list, but would be things like VO2 max, a DEXA scan, continuous glucose monitoring. Those are things I do not have yet, but I would love to have them because I would like to see the trends over time. It's not that I need it today. I feel good, but in a year or so, if something starts to change, I want to catch it quickly. So that's my theory.
I really love that because I always talk to people, I've talked to, I don't know, thousands and thousands of people now, but like getting them to understand, most people who think they're data oriented, they're not. Like they have emotional responses to single data points versus like what you're saying is like, what are the trends? What are the rolling averages? And that I think is amazing. And like as you were talking, it brought back to me like some simple things one is you have a very useful operating system when looking at data versus where a lot of people look at data, it actually harms them because then they, get all bothered and whatever. It's like, no, this is a data point. Let's look at what the trend is, and then do we need to do anything about this? So I would love those things too. DEXA scans, like where you can get it like this, that would be amazing because people look at the scale and they're like, oh my God, the weight went up. But if you had like some sort of very fast, you know, regular, consistent DEXA scan, you could be like, oh, well, none of your fat mass didn't go up. You didn't consider that you just drank a bottle of water. Of course, your weight's going to go up. Like, this is not things to freak out about. So I like
Ranbir, can you just tell our listeners what a DEXA scan is in case they don't know?
Yeah, so DEXA scan is one way that we can measure body fat, but the beauty of the DEXA scan is that, and obviously, the people will go, oh, nothing is that accurate, blah, blah, blah. Yes, but we can get trends. And it also measures muscle mass. It measures the density of the bone. And I don't know if they've added hydration, I think they can measure now, but like I don't know if they've added other components, but basically you lie down in this like tanning bed thing and a scanner goes over the top of your body and spits out a report for you to look at.
Awesome. All right. We are kind of moving into this next question, which is what is your process when you see something's wrong? So we're actually going to be wrapping up pretty quickly here. This is the last big question. So when you see something going wrong, what do you do? And I'm going to just share my method and as a springboard for this. So I have a little format that I use, and I do this once a week. So I have working, what is working, what's not working, what are my experiments and what are my goals. And I have this and I check it on Wednesday and like Saturday or Sunday. And I do this every week and I can see over time. So for instance, I injured this part of my arm in October of last year. And so I measure it and I put down not working. The arm still hurts. The experiments this week, I'm going to try a band exercise or I'm going to try whatever, some other vitamin or something. And so I track over time what I'm doing. And then I have a daily log that I make every night. And I can say sort of what I ate. I also have a macro app that I use for tracking the food. So what I'm trying to do is a little bit like Jenny is collect this data and then see, is this working or is it not working? And I'm experimenting. I don't know what's going to work. My body is unique. It doesn't matter if someone else. And what I just a perfect, an example is I wrote down whenever I drink alcohol, and then I would find there was correlations with negative health consequences. And I found that from going through my journal and finding the correlation between the data, which I hadn't actually known until I did that analysis. So I really think keeping just a very simple little log of what is going on with our body over time, it's really, really important beyond just like the sleep data, which is all important also. So as a springboard, what are some of the processes that you use when you do have a problem? So, Bill, you haven't said anything lately. Do you want to share? How do you problem solve when you have an issue?
Um, a lot of this is, I mean, when you have something with your arm, like you were just referencing, you're going, I mean, maybe you want to go to a massage therapist. Maybe you want to go to a chiropractor. There's a place for these people with those particular gifts, and maybe it's a matter of stretching. Then again, I don't know what the problem with your arm is, but a lot of this, coming back to what we've been saying, is knowing your own body, being sensitive to it. I have a Epix watch, Garmin, and that gives me sleep information, tells me what my heart rate is, that sort of thing. If my heart rate goes up, I have to ask myself, what is it? It could be something I ate. Then again, it could be worry that I have. So we're talking primarily about the physicality of us, but my way of understanding, I'm more than just a physical being with electrical impulses. I'm also a spiritual being. And being a Bible believer and a Christian, I have to ask myself, am I internalizing worries? Or am I bringing those before the Lord, casting my cares on Him, praying that He give me His perfect peace? Or if I have a physical issue, am I praying, Lord, give me wisdom on how to solve this issue? And that wisdom, that insight could come in many ways. It could come through watching a podcast like this and listening to the comments made by the various people that are part of this podcast. So when I'm trying to analyze issues I have, it might be a spiritual issue. It might simply be I'm worried about things, and things we worry about, if we don't have any control over them to remedy them, we just have to go to the Lord and say, Lord, please help me to have wisdom to know best how to. Am I just internalizing things when I should be praying over these things? So I think that's another thing. We can talk about the technical aspect, rings or watches or different tests we take, and those can be a very important part of it. But I think we have to address the spiritual aspect of this as well.
I like I
Go
like
ahead.
that, Dad. I think that's really good to bring because worry and anxiety is definitely depression. These are all big issues right now with our world. All right, so processes. Ranbir, when you're problem solving, what's your process? Can you walk us through it?
Yeah, so I always come back to, well, what is the outcome we're looking for? Because sometimes somebody will hear something on, oh, this is a problem, and they're like, oh my God, now you've created a problem for them. Maybe there was no problem. You're probably familiar with people who have no symptoms. They go get a scan or whatever, and they say, oh, you got 4 hernias. All of a sudden they have the pain starts to show up. There was no pain, and then vice versa. There's many studies and examples of that. So my first thing is like, what is our outcome that we're looking for? What is the goal? And then am I first doing the things, the big things that would contribute to that? Because if I have a problem, whatever kind of health problem or whatever, and then I'm like, oh, well, I'm just eating tons of food, not great quality, I'm drinking a lot, I'm not having any activity or strength training. Um, well, before you start diving into all these, let's start to take care of the big rocks, and then maybe it'll remedy itself. But then at least you have a basis to start to do that. So my process is clarify the goal, and then am I doing the big things? And like Bill said, I think that I put that above all the other stuff, is like the spirituality part and understanding, or trying to understand, you know, I think that's everything to me. Like, all this other stuff is like sits on top of it. So, and that's a difficult conversation for a lot of people to have, either because they're too cool or they're embarrassed or whatever it is. But and you got to find somebody who you like and trust to be able to guide you on that, in that direction. But yeah, as far as a specific process, I 9 times out of 10, they're not take care of the big rocks, and then they're worried about all these other small things. So my goal is always, hey, let's get back on the basics. Let's do that. Then let's revisit this. And then 9 times out of 10, the problem is resolved. Um, so yeah.
I think that's really, really great to hear from you. And Jenny, what about you? So you just discovered that your REM sleep is lower, or another example, how do you go about solving these kind of challenges?
Yeah, that could be one challenge, but I think another one could be you have an ache or pain that's new, or you can't do something that you want to do, right? So I think when problem solving, I agree with what we've already heard. Like, you really do need to know the outcome, though. But I'm all about getting help. I talk to people. I talk to Beth about it. I'm like, hey, Beth, this is happening. What do you think? And she'll be like, oh, I heard a podcast about this. Like, go listen. So number one is like, get data. Don't ignore it. Like, sometimes you need to give stuff a little bit of time to say, is this real? But when you figure out it's real, be proactive to learn about it. And then the other thing is get help from experts. I have the advantage of living in a big city in Chicago. We have amazing chiropractors, physical therapists, holistic doctors, functional doctors. I use them, right? And they have tremendous like opinions. And like, if you have a little ache in your arm and you go to a PT, they're like, yeah, it's actually this muscle over here. It's all tight. They work on it and it's all better. And it's like, why did I leave it for so long? So I would say it's those things of like, get information, but then also be willing to get help. And then know that like all you can do is your best. And we do age and we will change. And I guess there's some acceptance too, that some things are beyond our control. And then it's just a matter of making peace with that.
Yeah.
All right.
I think there's
Yeah.
a lot of
Bill.
wisdom in all this information that's coming forth from the group here. When I go to the supermarket any longer, I spend more time in the produce section. And I think when you're going to be eating things, you want things that are good for your body. And as Ranbir was saying, some of this stuff is simple. To eat vegetables, to eat fruit, to stay away from the snack section where it's all heavily processed food. If you stay in the outer areas of the supermarket, you're probably going to be better off than if you're going through so many aisles with so many things that have been so super processed. So things that were brought up today, you got to have goals, you got to have targets, you got to think through your priorities. You want to, even as Jenny was just saying, the kinds of doctors, there's a place for pills and surgery, but those are things that we want to avoid best we can. If we need to, then we go there. But if you're going to a chiropractor or a deep tissue massage therapist, they're really working with your bones or your muscles. It's not like invasive where they're going in and doing surgeries. Again, there's a place for that, but I think we should try to avoid that sort of invasive doctoring until it's absolutely a life or death. Coming back to Jenny's situation and her cancer, that was at that point a life and death situation. And so praise God that was available and God used it to bring you back to health, as well as this hormone replacement therapy. But Ranbir made it, the point many times, simplicity. What's the simplest remedy and solution for what I'm struggling with now? And then picking people's brains and knowing nobody's infallible in this world. Every human being we speak to is going to have an opinion, and maybe something worked for them, but might not be the answer for you, but it might lead you to talking to somebody else, or through your experimentation, leading you to find something else that worked better.
Yep, that's awesome. And so we are moving into the last section. Just speed round. And I think actually you just did this, Bill. So let's go to Jenny. Speed round. What can each of us do right now? What do you think the audience can take away?
I think the theme here is agency. Exercise your agency. Don't relinquish the agency to one expert, one doctor.
Ranbir, speed round.
Yeah, be open to a better way. and get like Jenny said, be open to help, and seek help. And just because the first person you talk to didn't make sense or it didn't work out, doesn't mean the next guy or the next girl will help you with an important piece of the puzzle. So
Mhm. All right. And Dad, I'm sorry, Bill, you
Yeah, I,
just,
I, I would
yeah.
say, in addition to the things already mentioned, like we have to have goals, targets, priorities. And I think Ranbir pointed out, avoid fads. Look for things that have been around for a long time. Everybody's coming up. We live in a society of capitalism, and so somebody's going to come up with this. Here's this remedy cure. If you do this, you can lose 50 pounds in 30 days. I think we have to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves and not be gullible and naive. Look for things that have been around for a long time, and avoid these kinds of fads and fads that come along.
Mhm.
Again, it comes back to just a lot to self-control.
Mhm.
When you
Yeah.
buy something that's a fad, that means I got a shortcut now. I can just do this, or I can just take the pill. That's where we started with in all of this, right?
Yep.
If I just have more self-discipline and I cut this out and I add that, or I haven't done exercise in a long time. Sometimes people, and I tell you, I know you know this, Ranbir, people that haven't done exercise in a long time, maybe years, they're going to join your gym. And after a week, they're injured because they thought in a week's time they could be looking like Charles Atlas, and instead they're, in a hospital bed in traction.
yeah,
So, we have to use a lot of wisdom in all of this stuff.
Absolutely. I love the word wisdom. It's come up a lot in this conversation. And I think that is really the thing that's missing in a lot of the health. But so this is just the first of a three-part series. So please stay tuned because we're going to jump into the current healthcare system in the next one. And if anyone knows anyone to have on that podcast, I'm scheduling that soon. So please put it in the comments. And Ranbir, if you know anyone from your list of doctors who want to go on the record to talk about the current healthcare system, which I know they probably don't want to. And then the next one's the future of health. Like, how do we design infrastructure for the children, right? And I just think if we could get to the children and start teaching them the way they should grow, as my dad would say, then when they're old, they won't, they won't go away from it. So let's do this last thing here. We're going to plug something. So Jenny, is there something the audience should go look at from you, or something you want to recommend to them? How can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Connect with me, say hello. I'm very friendly. I'm also a life coach. So let me know if you would like coaching. There we go.
So should they just add you on LinkedIn and then message you?
Yes.
All right, and then her full name will be in the show notes. So check. Ranbir, tell us about your gym. Do you have social media people can follow you on?
yeah, everything. I got tons of stuff all over the place. If you just search Ranbir Sanghera on Instagram, YouTube, Substack, podcasts. I think the podcast is called the Ranbir Sanghera Strength Show. But yeah, so I'm all over the place. If you search my name, I try to
Mhm.
share as much useful and practical, simple advice as possible.
And what about your gym for people who are in San Jose?
If anybody's in San Jose, the gym is now called Hyper Strength. I still so I it's my buddy's gym now. I still coach out of there. So if I don't take in-person clients too often, but if somebody really wants to, they can reach out to me. Otherwise, they can reach out to Hyper Strength. They're great team over there as well. So
Great. And then Bill Welzien, do you have anything to plug today? And how can people
Well,
find you?
I am a Bible-believing, born-again Christian. Jesus Christ is my Lord and my Savior. And if there's anybody listening who wants to learn more about the Bible or what the Bible has to say on health or having a living, vital relationship with Almighty God, the listener could contact me at like in Vincent, WELZ, like zebra, IEN, at AOL.com. And I also have a website, BibleBill.com.
All right, I'll put all
Sorry,
that in the.
so let me change that. It's BibleBill.org, not .com. BibleBill.org.
I'm going to put it all in the show notes. So if people want to just go check in the description, they can read all of this. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I want to thank our guests, our panelists, Jenny Topinka, Ranbir Sanghera, and Bill Welzien today. Stay tuned, like, subscribe, and everyone needs to watch this. So literally send this to everyone you know. See you later. This has been Making Meaning. Bye.
Thank you.